Hi, and a warm welcome to the Virtual Coach Advantage cast. I'm Emma Calvert. I'm the co founder and coach at Springboard Future. And today I'm going to be joined by my wonderful co founder and master coach, Nina Bettridge. And we're going to be talking about developing your management why. And the big why here is why it's so important to you. So, we're going to be delving into this topic and hopefully helping you understand how to do it and what impact it can have for you. So, let's get started. Let's dive right into this topic then, Neela. I like to keep things very simple. I'm that kind of girl. So tell me simply, what the heck is management why?
So, simply put, it is about developing your vision, the way you manage and lead. It needs to be connected to how you show up as a manager and very clearly what your values are and your purposes. And very often, as middle managers or even top management in organizations, I come across the fact that people are unclear as to their why they do what they do, and therefore the type of leader that they want to be.
Well, thanks for keeping it very simple for me, Nina. But tell me, if I'm somebody in middle management or I'm a growing leader, why is it so important for me to understand what I stand for as a manager and what is it going to do for me?
Yeah, I think sometimes there is a disconnect between who we are as people and who we are as leaders. And of course, we are one. And actually, if we as a person understand what our values are, the purpose that we have, and what it is for us to be authentic, it's a much easier path to actually think about what your why might be, what your purpose might be, what you stand for might be as a manager. And also, many times in our careers, we find ourselves in situations where we feel uncomfortable. And it is helpful to understand what your values are because often it's when your values are being breached. And if you understand and are self aware about that, it really enables you to respond in a proactive way rather than a reactive way. And so we understand where our boundaries are as well when we are very clear as to what we stand for and what our why is.
There's a couple of things that really interest me in there, Neela. And the first is the last bit you were talking about, a breach. But before I come to that, you were very much talking about obviously the importance and how to do it. But I reflect on my experience of working in companies. And I know that a lot of new managers or people who've taken on leadership roles, they just get thrown into it often. They might have some skills training around, employment law or performance management or whatever, but we often don't have that space, that time, or that coaching to actually think about what our management why is and really try to develop it. So what are some of the things that we can do? And then I'm going to come back to this issue about breaching.
Yes, thank you for that, Emma. Well, it's a really interesting thing, isn't it? I think in the past, although that is changing now, it's been seen as something that is a nice to have. It's rather soft and woolly to understand these things. So people are thrown straight into skills training, and in some way, they're supposed to have some sort of osmosis to pick up the why and the leader that they're going to be, or in fact, see other role models around them. I would counter that and say, actually, to really develop your why, you need to be thinking about what you're good at, what you get paid for, what you're passionate about, and what you love doing in the world. And first of all, because that really, really gets you to understand what your why might be. And then you can start thinking, following on from that, for you, why is managing and leading important? Why do you think how you lead might be important to others? How does your management approach show up? If I was being managed by you, what would I experience? And actually, does it align to what you think your why is and your goals? And what is your effect on other people? What's the value? What's the cost? And then have a think about what are you going to do to develop your why, your styles, and your skills. Now, purpose changes probably once or twice in our entire lifetimes. Real deep purpose that is linked to authenticity and the way we show up. And often I find that managers are trying to be someone else and not who they are. And so there is a lack of coherence that goes on. And that is why I'm absolutely passionate about why managers, middle managers, leaders of all levels need to really understand what their why is.
And that last point you're making, Neela, it does really link back to that issue you were talking about earlier, which is when your values are breached, or making sure you set your boundaries. And you talking about leaders, managers, perhaps showing up not who they are. I mean, that really resonates with me. I kind of started to work in the city in the 90s, and you were sort of you were told to look the same, be the same. And lots of experience of people we coach. Sometimes you've got to toe the party line, though, haven't you? Sometimes the organization needs to do something and you might not agree with it. So how do we reconcile some of that? And how do we know when it's taken too far for us?
Yeah, really great question, Emma. I'd like to say something just before that. Whilst we have still a long way to go, I think that there is a movement around diversity and inclusion, which is really starting to roll. So people are recognizing that people from very different backgrounds to ourselves, with very different points of view that we may not agree with, are important within organizations. The second thing is around values. There are some values which we are prepared to stretch, and there are others which we are simply not prepared to stretch. And really, the call is for each of us to really understand where our red lines are. And I know personally, I have been in situations in my career, particularly when I was more junior, where I have stretched a value to almost breaking point, but it's sat with me and I've been okay with that. But there have been other times where I've been asked to do things where I've thought, no, that's absolutely wrong and I don't agree with it. And I have made my decisions accordingly. But if you are not clear about your purpose and your values and your why, and you do not have confidence in that, you are less likely to take a stand. And what my worry is if you do that when you are more junior, that could become the way you actually do things as you go up the ladder and the leader that you become. Because we all know as we get more senior, we are asked to take a stand more and more often for things that we believe in and be able to communicate them. So I'm not suggesting for 1 second that we fly off the handle and behave in bad ways or anything like that. But we need to know where the line is for us and be able to communicate well and respectfully with others to be able to tell them why we may not agree with something.
Well, I wish somebody had given me that cautionary tale back in the late 90s. But we get there sooner rather than later, Neela. So the other thing I want to talk about in connection with my management why is leadership styles, because we talk, in sort of coaching terms around certain types of different leadership styles. So how does that connect with our management why?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? I'm going to sort of approach this leadership style in a slightly different way. There are 4 different styles out there. There is the warrior, there is the lover, there is the maverick, and there is the collaborator. One of those styles will be the style we feel much more comfortable being in. What we need to recognize is that we need to flex into other styles as well. Because, let's face it, in our careers, different situations require us to be different things. And self awareness linked to why actually is what is the style that we prefer doing, and is it appropriate to the situation that we're in? And I think that's a piece of self awareness which we need to be constantly calibrating around, thinking about what it is that we need to be doing in the moment that is the best thing to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, Neela. Actually, one of our coachees that I'm working with at the moment definitely sees themselves in that sort of maverick kind of space as leadership style, and is feeling now as they're becoming growing in their leadership, that actually doesn't always work for them because it's not always taken seriously. So there's definitely something in there about being able to adapt your style, isn't there?
There really, really is. Yeah, it's a very important thing. And I'm not expecting, people to completely change, but actually, we need to be able to visit all those four areas because actually, particularly if you're a warrior, for instance, being in that style all the time is not useful.
No, definitely not. Some fantastic tips there and things for us to think about. Any recommended resources you've got that we can dive into and get more information on this topic?
Yes, I highly recommend if people really want to find more out about this topic to have a look on YouTube. Simon Sinek has a fantastic, I think it's 10 minutes long, YouTube video on why and how he has developed it. And it's a fantastic introduction to this topic. Also, Brené Brown has done some fabulous videos on vulnerability, appropriate vulnerability, which I think also are very linked to how we develop our why. So I would recommend those two resources to anybody listening to this podcast today.
Great, thanks, Neela. Yeah, I really love both those people, and they've both put a great deal of content out there. So definitely recommend everybody to dive in and find those resources and all the other stuff they've put out. Well, great conversation we've had today, Neela. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I'm really excited about our next podcast, where we've got the intriguing title of Facing the Black Swan. So that is something definitely to make sure that you all tune into. Well, thanks for listening today. We really hope you've enjoyed our podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback, any comments you've got, or even requests for topics. So please do get in touch. You can reach us on our website, which is springboardfuture.com. Follow us on our LinkedIn or Twitter pages. And don't forget to join us for our next podcast. Thanks for joining the Virtual Coach Advantage podcast. We hope to coach you again soon.